Welcome back to Ottawa Valley Rambles. Today we visit the oldest marked grave in the Ottawa Valley, as well as the final resting place of Andrew Leamy. Our filming location, once a peaceful pastoral place overlooking Lake Leamy, is now meters away from Highway 50 in Gatineau. Please forgive the traffic noise.
So Rick, we're in the Notre Dame cemetery off of Fournier Boulevard. And one of the reasons we're here is this is actually one of the things I've been wanting to see the most. I've wanted to discuss probably the most when we've been doing this vlog, or this vlog rather, is the story of George Smith and what the significance is of his location here and where it's situated.
Here he lies, George Smith. He was buried here in 1809, which marks this spot basically as the oldest known settler burial in the oldest permanent settlement of the Ottawa Valley. We're sitting in a quiet corner of the Gatineau farm, right by the shore of Leamy Lake. This area where George is buried is the Leamy burial ground, and it began with George's burial. And it wouldn't have been Andrew Leamy who buried him here. That was a year before Andrew Leamy was actually born. But George Smith was working in the timber industry on the Rideau River, and he drowned at Three Rocks. It's written right on his headstone. What
do we call Three Rocks now?
Three Rocks Rapids became Hog's Back once the dam was put in. So he likely was working with a team and fell into the rapids and drowned, and his body was actually washed down the Rideau River and was only discovered on the banks of the Ottawa River. So he must have fallen over the falls as well. And the family story was that he was buried here by Andrew Leamy, and he was actually drowned in 1828. That has been proven to be wrong, so I think what happened is it got confused, and it wasn't actually Andrew Leamy. It would have been either Philemon Jr. or Philemon Sr. That a team of theirs found the body on the banks of the river, and he was brought here to the Gatineau farm to be buried. And I like to think that because this was Philemon Jr.'s land, that either father or son, Philemon Jr. or Philemon Sr., carved the headstone and put George here, lovingly buried him, because they probably knew that he was the son of Thomas Smith, Captain Thomas Smith, for whom Smith's Falls is named.
So where I'm standing, I'm looking right across Highway 50, less than 100 meters away from me, maybe 50 meters away from me. And there's an embankment that goes down to where there's another channelway here. Was that channel already here? Like I'm looking right at Leamy Lake. How would that have been connected to the farm?
This is the discharge channel of Leamy Lake. It's a natural channel, it wasn't dug, but it was the way that water escaped from Leamy Lake into the Ottawa River. So back when the Leamy Lake was never connected to the Gatineau, that was the means by which the water flowed from Leamy Lake. And so this was a very, very quiet corner, uncultivated, of the Gatineau farm, and passed basically from Philemon Jr. to his daughter Ericina, and through his wife Sally. And this became the Leamy Burial Ground, opened in 1809 and donated to the Oblates in just after Andrew died in 1872 is when this became Notre Dame Cemetery.
And now one of the biggest cemeteries in the whole area. It's a beautiful place.
This was the quietest corner of the cemetery.
Yeah.
And when I grew up, we'd come here and there was nary a sound.
Yeah.
So this is Andrew Leamy's plot in the Leamy Burial Ground. It's a good story about Andrew Leamy and his affiliations, but it revolves around his death as well. And Andrew Leamy died in 1868 at the age of 52 years. And his death was rather tragic. He decided to go into Ottawa the day before he died, So he hitched up his carriage and hitched up one of his favorite racehorses to his carriage, went into Ottawa, did some errands, had lunch in a pub, and then came back home. But he did not come home that evening, which of course really made Ericina quite anxious. So she sent out a search party the next morning, and the Leamy Lane, which leads to the farm, which we were on the other day, Leamy Lane is about a mile long, and the search party followed the lane backward and found Andrew tied up in the wheels of his carriage. So they assumed that the horse must have bucked, and Leamy fell out of his carriage and died as a result of that. He had a terrible gash on his head, several broken bones. And they brought him home and laid him down. He was still somewhat conscious, but he did not last the day and died that evening. The family mourned, and this was a terrible thing for Ericina because her father, Philemon Jr., had died in exactly the same way, breaking his neck being thrown from a carriage when she was 2 years old, so before she even knew him. So 10 years passed, and the family, of course, had mourned, but his death was a distant memory until a lady by the name of Mrs. Maxwell came forward. She and her husband had a terrible divorce, and she came forward to the authorities to say that her husband, Henry Maxwell, was in possession of Leamy's gold watch, and he had come home with it in his pocket the same night that Andrew Leamy had died. There was a court case. He was charged with murder, and in the court case he claimed, and was backed up by his brother-in-law, that he came upon Andrew Leamy tied up in the carriage wheels, and seeing that there was no chance for him to survive, went through his pockets and stole his watch. So he was found not guilty of murder, but that begs the question of whether his story was true or false. How this story is tied into some of Andrew Leamy's associates is that Andrew Leamy was known to be a very convivial man. He stood for hundreds of people for their weddings. One person who he was very friendly with, actually he was friendly with many, particularly in the Irish community of Ottawa, Daniel O'Connor. Nicholas Sparks was his father-in-law, but Thomas D'Arcy McGee was also a very good friend when D'Arcy McGee came here from Montreal, to the point where Andrew Leamy's grandson, Thomas D'Arcy McCready, became Thomas D'Arcy McGee's godson. Now, the reason why I mentioned Thomas D'Arcy McGee is because, famously, as we all know, Thomas D'Arcy McGee was assassinated on Spark Street. And now the history is that Andrew Leamy can be tied to that in one way, and that is that Andrew Leamy's death was exactly 2 weeks after Thomas D'Arcy McGee's death, 14 days following, which is one reason why Andrew Leamy's death was not huge news in the area, because people were still reeling from Thomas D'Arcy McGee's death. So here is Andrew Leamy buried in Notre Dame Cemetery in Hull, and Thomas D'Arcy McGee was buried in Notre Dame Cemetery just a few days apart, but Notre Dame Cemetery in Montreal.